What is going on, guys? It has been a hot second since I have been on the YouTube game. If you saw the little update a couple videos ago, you probably know that I had some big life changes. I moved, still in Nashville, but I moved across town, had a whole bunch of work that kind of just took up a lot of my spare time that I was using for making videos and stuff like that. But it just feels good to be back and kind of back into a flow and a rhythm again. And I just gotta give a shout out to all the new followers over the past week or so. And if you are not one of the new ones or haven't seen yet, I was just featured on Andrew Masters' studio tour series. I freaking love that guy. We've been buds for a few years now and actually met via studio tour world for my old spot in Kansas City. He talks a little bit about that in the video. If you haven't watched it, go watch that. Come back. Love you, Andrew. Thanks for swinging by, man. But I am super excited for this video. I'm gonna be talking about the right way to edit drums to me. Now, I feel like everyone that has done this for a while kind of has their own set of right and wrongs, but the system you'll see today is just kind of what makes the most sense to me. And it's super fun. I feel like most of the time that I'm working with a newer artist or something, they'll bring up how insane it is watching the editing and tracking process of drums, because it's very detailed and meticulous, but I've kind of just found with the assembly line sort of approach that I have to editing, we just kind of get to keep moving and grooving throughout the session, and we don't have to get lost in audio files, and there can be a system in place that actually makes sense and is approachable and easy. And as you know, I am a drummer, and so I have opinions, but I really do think drums are the hardest thing to capture correctly on the day-to-day sense. You know, there's orchestra and all this other craziness, but the more down the center approach to recording, I think drums are a beast. They're a hassle. But I promise there is the other side. We just have to figure out a system on how we get there quickly. And today we're going to talk about the editing portion. I'm just playing along to a portion of a song. This is for an artist I do a whole bunch of work with. His name is Xander Ward. I'm going to link his stuff in the description. If you like what you hear, go check him out, give him a follow. But I'll quit yapping so I can go do more yapping. Let's get into it. So I'm gonna set the scene for you. We have recorded a handful of drum takes. We are sitting down to start the editing process, and I'm just gonna show you exactly what I do. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm obviously working in Pro Tools, so some of this will translate, some of it probably won't, to other softwares. But I feel like just seeing the process and kind of breaking down some specifics, somewhat of the order of operations, I feel like will be really helpful, no matter the DAW that you might be working in. So number one, huge rule that you should not break: leave all of your drum channels grouped until we are completely done editing and timing up the whole drum kit. It's going to make your life so much easier when you're sifting through the playlists, when you're editing and crossfading. This is going to save you so much headache and trouble down the road when we're working with a bunch of different takes and trying to splice different fills and sections together. It's just going to save you a bunch of headache. So number one rule, do not break it. Group all the drums and do not ungroup until we're finished. So now we are going to open up my playlists, and you're just going to see here I've got 4 different takes. I'm going to kind of show you my process, kind of sifting through and what I would typically do. In this scenario today, I really just felt like my last full take was the best one. So that's the one we're going to be working with. But in a normal scenario, I would probably sift through and comp from all these takes. At least for me, I don't approach the drum parts as like exactly one-to-one every take. A lot of times I'll play different parts just to like see what feels right, try different fills. One take I might do open hat on the choruses versus a ride or a crash. So I'll just get a bunch of takes with all that different kind of stuff. Now, where this song is finished and out, I just already know the drum parts that we landed on. So I'll just take a little second and kind of show you what I would do in a scenario where I'm comping takes. Yeah, so let's say I really liked the overall groove from take 1, but this fill from take 2 felt like something special. So typically what I would do is pull those from the playlist and put them on my main playlist. And Pro Tools has this really nifty feature where if everything is grouped, all the playlists are being edited together, which is why it's so important. So that way I'm not getting like kick from take 1, but the overheads are from take 4 and everything just gets messy and gross. And all you do in Pro Tools is highlight from the playlist that you want to pull from, and they have this nifty little button that just throws it up to your main playlist. So I'll basically go through and examine every take through the entire song and just pull different things that I like. And then once we or to a point where the whole song is finished, I'll come back over to the playlist selector and just go back to waveform so I can kind of see, you know, a little easier to look at just all my channels with the correct edits. So that's really all I do as far as playlist selection and how I kind of comp the whole drum kit as a unit. But for the sake of this video, we are going to say that that has already been done. We are just going to keep chugging on the take that I knew I liked just now. So let's move on to drum editing. So basically this step of the process, I'm really just wanting to fix any mistakes as far as timing. So if there's a part of my groove that's like dragging a little bit or rushing a little bit, this is just kind of where I get to craft it into the perfect drum take. This is another Pro Tools move, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my grouped tracks. I'm gonna select the rhythmic portion of the elastic audio down here. So I'm gonna click that and kind of let all these tracks load into the elastic audio. And from there, I'm just gonna highlight whatever section I wanna start quantizing. For me, I'll just highlight the whole song and then kind of take it in the elastic audio to warp around or move around. But you can take it section by section if that's like a little easier to chew on at first. But for me, I'm just going to pull up the quantize here. It's really helpful for quantization to work correctly to have your grid in the correct format. So if I got a groove that's kind of riding on like 16th note hats, it wouldn't make a ton of sense for me to quantize to a whole note grid. So in that case, I would go to the 16th note grid. But this song I know is triplet feel. So it's kind of that. So I know it's going to make my life super easy to go ahead and put the grid in the quarter note triplet feel. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And you'll see all my audio files kind of move into place. And I can already see some issues, so that's going to be helpful for what happens in a second. So now that we've ran all the drum channels through the quantization, I'm going to come back down here and switch from waveform to warp. And so from here, you'll see all of the corrections that it's trying to make. And I'll go ahead and just delete all these and kind of show you again. So that's my raw files. I'll select it all, run it through the quantizer again. And then, yeah, you can just kind of see what it's trying to do. And I actually think this might be 8th note triplet. Yeah, that's looking a little more like what I'm wanting. So real quick, I'm just going to show you my drums in context of the song without any of the quantization or editing love yet. Now, I feel like I'm pretty okay at keeping time, but I'm a human, and so you'll hear some looseness in the drums, but I'll just kind of play you a piece of the track without any of the quantization or editing yet, just to kind of give you a feel of what we're going to be working on. Yeah, so definitely not bad, but we're basically just going to take that and make it, you know, as perfect as possible because we don't like to sound human around here. But yeah, so we're just going to highlight all that. We are going to apply 8th note triplet, quantization, boom, slap, bop, diggity dog. I can already see some weird things happening, but we're going to listen through with the click soloed and just kind of see what's happening, see what Pro Tools is trying to fix successfully and unsuccessfully, and we're going to, yeah, help each other out, me and Pro Tools. Yeah, so you can already see Pro Tools is like getting some of it, not getting some of it. These are ticks. We're going to go through tick by tick and just kind of figure out what doesn't really need to be there. So you can see here, this is a kick transient, but then it's also confused by thinking the cymbal transient is kind of like also a separate hit. So we're going to go ahead, little shortcut option, and get rid of that. So that just fixed kind of that artifacty, gross, farty thing that was there like this and turned it into more of a perfect hit. So basically, this step of the process, we're just going to go through and analyze every tick of the song and take away anything that doesn't need to be there. And I've just learned that for the most part, cymbals are what confuses the quantization the most, because quantization is working off of, you know, the steep part of the transient. And obviously a cymbal is going to be more of a long, flowy transient versus, you know, the steep thing. Most of the time, the things that I'm fixing are going to be cymbal bleed or cymbal ring out that Pro Tools is just being confused by. So we're just gonna work through this clip. It's about a minute long. We're gonna try to make it make sense. Yep, so those are weird. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete both of those ticks and see what's supposed to be happening. Yep, so it looks like I was just a little late, and so we're gonna tighten those up. Yep. And I'm not loving that little warbly thing that's happened on the end of that crash, but we'll see if it kind of works out in the mix. Yeah, so I'm not loving that. So what I'm gonna do is kind of cut the end of the cymbal and just give that more of a fade. So a lot of that warble isn't, bleeding into the mix. So let's listen again. Yep, it's sounding better, and I'll probably reinforce that with some extra crashes later. But that's feeling better. Let's keep chugging. Gonna switch back to warp here. Yep, it's feeling good. Cool. So that's all feeling great to me. I'm just going to go right to the end of this break because this can be a helpful thing to notice. So where I have the quantization set to 8th note triplet, it's not going to grab the 16th notes. And sometimes that can work in your favor. Sometimes it cannot work in your favor. In this case, I don't hate it, but I'll go ahead and show you what I would do if something like that was bugging me, where like a subdivision was feeling out of time or something like that. So I'm going to switch this. I'm still on triplet, but I'm going to switch this to 16th note, and I can just add a tick there and tighten that up. So it wasn't bugging me, but just so you can see, if the quantization isn't grabbing something, you also have the power. So let's keep on chugging. There's also no hit here. I don't know if, a drum thrown squeak or cymbal bleed or something was like bugging that, but we're going to get rid of that because there's nothing there, just to save us any warble that might be happening. People probably have different opinions on this, but for me, the kick drum should always take precedence. So like in this scenario, you can see that Pro Tools is being a little confused. It's grabbing the steep part of the transient of the cymbal and the steep part of the transient of the kick. But where I'm human, they're in microscopically different places. Because even though I'm hitting the crash and kick at the same time, there might be a couple milliseconds of difference. What I'm gonna do in this situation, instead of the cymbal being the thing that was being dragged to the downbeat, I'm gonna pull the kick to the downbeat just so I know, the crash into that chorus is gonna feel the most energetic and impactful versus, the cymbal crash. And it's probably a microscopic difference, but to me, sometimes I hear those things, sometimes I don't. So I just always err on the side of doing it. Never regret doing it. So we'll just keep chugging here. Yeah, so I'm not liking that little warble on the cymbals. Keep going though. Take that out. Yep, it's better. There's a little hiccup there. Just gonna take these out and kind of see what's supposed to happen. Yeah, so it looks like there was just an extra tick that wasn't supposed to be detected. So I'm gonna take that out and then just pull over the actual transient. Keep chugging. So here's another one of those scenarios where if this was bugging me, I would come over to 16th note triplet, and tighten that up. Yeah, and so that's kind of the end of this section. So from here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna highlight our whole section that we just quantized, or in most cases, the whole song. And we are basically just going to print the quantization into the tracks. And that, this whole portion right here is a big reason that I stay with Pro Tools. I feel like there's a lot of things that would be better about my workflow in like a Logic or Ableton, But where I track so much drums and manipulate WAV files more than I do MIDI or anything like that, it's just kind of a no-brainer for me to stay in this kind of workflow. And so, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and commit those. So all I do now is take these off of Rhythmic, which is going to put them into the standard Elastic Audio, which is nothing. It asks you if you want to revert, cancel, or commit. Revert would just undo everything I just did and put it back into its original format without any of the quantization. So I'm going to not do that. Done that before. It sucks. And what I'm going to do is just commit. And so now we will see Pro Tools is basically just printing everything I just worked on. And so from here, I'm just going to consolidate my WAV files. And now I've just got one big, pretty, beautiful drum take, which leads me to the last and final step, which is drum bleed sucks. Drum bleed is the most annoying thing to deal with in the mixing process. It's not as big of a deal to me in the production phase because, you know, we're really just like chipping away at parts and figuring out the parts and all that kind of stuff. But when I get drum files from other producers, if I'm ever hired for a mix job or something, and they have taken care of the audio bleed, then I am one happy mixer. And on the contrary, sometimes when they don't, it just adds, you know, another tedious step in the mixing process, which in my opinion should be done in the production phase. So basically at this point, we are going to ungroup the drums finally, and we're going to leave that alone. So for the toms, I'm basically going to go through and find everywhere that I'm not hitting that drum, and I'm just going to delete it because typically there's really no need for it to be in the mix. It's just taking up frequency space that is very precious. And I wouldn't say this is for every scenario. You know, if you want the more messy, big roomy thing, maybe I wouldn't take these out. Or if it's, you know, more of a brush style kit, maybe I want all that like mess in there, so I wouldn't take it out. But in most scenarios where I'm hitting hard, I'm going to take all the bleed out. So that fill, there's basically 2 rack hits, and I can just follow the transients on this kind of stuff. But there's 2 rack hits, there's a floor tom hit, and then some cymbals and stuff like that. So I know, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I know that I can just keep the rack tom, and then let's see if that's a floor tom 2 times in a row. Yep. So basically for this, I just want it to be a tight, punchy tom. So I'm not going to worry about a bunch of this extra resonance. I'm just going to cut that right at the next transient, which is just my preference on this kind of kit. But from there, I'm basically just going to create a crossfade, and I'm going to do a really short 7 or 8 millisecond fade on the front. And then on the back, I'm going to go a little bit longer just to kind of smooth out the end of that resonance so it doesn't feel like it's gating really hard or something. So 7 on the front, and then on the back, I'm going to probably go 75-ish. I'm going to even go a little more. I'm going to do 100 this time. I'm liking the way that looks like it'll kind of slant off there. So I'm just going to play that with the bleed and then without the bleed, just to show you how big of a difference that tom bleed will make in the overall sound of the kit. Yeah, so you can really see how much extra messy nonsense that just helps cut out. And I just found that so helpful once I get to the mix phase. I'm not fighting all those frequencies, and I don't even have to second guess, you know, where the toms are going to sit, because I can now compress those way harder than I would with all that bleed, and I can be more aggressive with EQs without, you know, like the consequence of all this nastiness coming through from cymbal bleed and all that kind of stuff. So we're basically just going to go through and do that for the rest of this section. And so let's just get to listening. I gotta say, they do sound pretty sweet with all that tom bleed, but I know once we get to the cymbals, it is not gonna be so cool. So I'm gonna basically cut all the rack tom out. There is quite a bit of floor tom happening in this whole section, so I'll probably just leave that in. Yeah, it feels cool. Yep, I'm gonna get rid of that tom, the rack tom. Do my crossfade. Yeah, and that little tambourine action, I think that's really fun. But again, with the rack tom bleed, it's just like taking over the mix for like that split second. So I do think getting rid of this rack tom bleed, it is just going to take care of all that as well. Yeah, now the tambourine just kind of sits in a cool place in the room like you'd want it to. Do my crossfades and listen to that again, make sure I didn't miss anything. And I'm actually going to go ahead and cut that last floor tom transient because I think that's just mostly snare bleeding through. Yep, cleaned it up big time. And I know this is a big snare fill, so I'm going to go ahead and cut all that. And so right now I'm just kind of looking at transients because I think the toms will mostly tell me where they're at. Yep, the floor tom. Let's see. Yeah, and then it looks like we just end with cymbals. So basically at this point, I'm just going to go through and make sure I've covered all my bases with crossfades. And then I'm going to commit these into audio files. So now I've got the toms living in this space, but I don't have to worry about all that tom bleed fighting my mix. And so pretty much any time that I'm sending out a track for mix that I produced or getting a mix from more of like a seasoned producer, this is most likely what the tom tracks will look like. You have your cleaned up toms and then all this dead space that's just taken care of. And in a similar sense, obviously it's not like this on this song, but in a similar sense, if I have like a floor tom only section and there's all this like crazy snare bottom or snare top bleed that I don't want or just want less of, I'll go through and automate or take it completely out. So it's not only for the toms, but for this song, I pretty much only was worried about the tom bleed because the snare is pretty prominent through the whole thing. And yeah, now that I have the toms figured out, I think it feels really good and balanced. So just take it from the top here and see how we did and if there's anything we want to mess with or tweak or anything. But yeah, let's take it. So it feels mostly great. There's one tiny thing that I'm hearing that I think I missed in the quantization phase. And so this could be helpful to see because this happens a lot where you miss something and you have to go back and figure it out. I'm basically going to regroup everything. There's this one floor tom hit that felt, or it's the kick hit, sorry. It just felt early and kind of like ruined the pocket for a second. So basically I'm going to, like I said, regroup everything. And then I'm going to tap to transient. So I'm just going to hit tab if you're working on Mac. I'm going to split off all those tracks and basically now pull that wave file individually to the transient. And then I'll just drag this back over and kind of crossfade. And you know, it doesn't look like the perfect crossfade as far as volume, but in the mix of the song, it's going to be totally fine. And then where this is a crash, I'm going to do a little bit of a longer crossfade just to help kind of smooth that cymbal out. So let's hear that, what we just fixed. Yeah, that timing's feeling a lot better. So yeah, honestly, at this point, I'm gonna reconsolidate all that stuff. But I would feel, you know, really happy and like this is at a good place where I would send it off to a mixer. Like if I'm getting hired out just for a drum session or something, this is basically my full editing process. I would feel pretty happy and proud of that to send that out. Just having, you know, it already cleaned up, edited, the tom bleed already figured out. I feel like if I was mixing, that would be an exciting place to get the drums at. And I would say if getting files from you is more of an exciting thing than an annoying thing, if you've already done a lot of this front end work, being excited to get files from someone versus not means maybe you would be more of the consistent call or the repeat ask. And so that's another reason I might go this far when I'm doing just a drum tracking session. Just kind of going the extra mile for a producer or a mixer. It puts you in good graces and it's just more likely that you'll probably get asked again versus sending someone just an unedited mess of drums that they have to then go figure out. If there's anything else like this that you just want to see a producer kind of get more in the weeds on the process and all that, I would be more than stoked to make any more videos. And yeah, I'm so excited to make this more of a normal thing again. And also just a quick plug for a lot of those that are new here. I offer a whole lot of different things that you can find on my website. I do full-on production for hire. I do mixing, and a lot of that is remote. I have a week-long apprenticeship that I do, consultations for production and mix feedback, and also have a pretty dope little sample pack. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Peace.